Tonawanda Recreation Department as a recreation supervisor at 4 courts at the foot of Sheridan Drive, and they were the first clay courts in the Buffalo area on Tuca, which is like our hard true. Went to get a drink of water on a water fountain on the court, and the water shot over onto the court, and it made a mess. So I took my foot and I was angry, and I was going like that to the wet spot. And I came back a few minutes later, and it was hard. And I said, oh. So I ran home, picked up a garden hose and a small garden roller, and came back with a piece of plywood 4 feet long and 6 inches deep. And I got on my hands and knees, and for four courts, I leveled the court and squirted and rolled and started some tournaments there. Len Surfastini, who happened to be the club president at the time, played in the tournament. He won the singles, beat me in the first round. And I was happy at the way the courts were going. He asked me if I would be interested in being the club manager. He gave it a nice title because the courts here were so bad, and he was happy with the way the courts were at the town court. And I said, sure, I would, and the pay was $2 an hour. So I was getting $80 a week. And my job was to try to create what you have here now with no money and no equipment. I started in 1957, and I was here for 15 years. When I got here, the clubhouse is just a plain clubhouse, little log cabin. There was no closure on the bottom. There were rodents all over the place, and newsboys, when they had extra papers, would throw the papers underneath the clubhouse, so it was a mess. There was no grass. The fences were like almost chicken wire fences. The courts were pure clay, and they were cracked all the time because we couldn't get enough water on them. We were watering the courts with a garden hose. So I'd come in the middle of the night, shoot the water up in the air and try to simulate rain so the courts would be ready in the morning. The courts, however, needed to be lined every day. We had a wet liner. We had to take masons line, put the lines down, and line the courts every day. Sometimes if it didn't rain, I got lucky and I just had to do the base lines and service lines. We had no equipment. There was no garage to store anything. We had just a little bit of equipment, which is under a tarpaulin. And there was no drainage system, so when it rained, the water would just take all the clay, and the sidewalks were covered with clay all around. And so I would come early in the morning and work as hard as I could. I had to sift clay in order to fill the holes. We had a stockpile of clay in the parking lot, and to get rid of the stones, you had to throw the clay against the screen the clay, fill in the holes that Charlie Garfinkel made with a size 16 shoe. Every time he came to play, I said, oh no. And that's the way it went. We had no equipment whatsoever. The roller we had would take 20, 30 minutes to do one court. So I decided I would do something quicker, so we bought a 500-pound roller. So I would take the 500-pound roller and run with it. And I could do 3 courts in 15 minutes then. And so it progressed like that. We had no windscreens. Irv Brent, who was one of the club founders, decided that we should have windscreens. So he ordered the windscreens 12 feet high, and we put them on the chicken wire fences. One day it was very windy, and I put up the whole center 12 feet from bottom to top, threading it with clothesline. It was a tedious job. And I stopped for lunch and started to walk away, and I heard creaking, and I turned around, and the whole center fence went right down to the floor. And so it went, and it was a very, very difficult and tedious job. And little by little, as the club became a little more affluent, we started making improvements. We added a porch. We added concrete, a patio that we have here. We added even a little rotisserie so some of the members could cook their own food. We started getting some plants. I made the flagpole out of used pipes. I made the bench out of, it's been reconstructed, but I made that bench and garden over there. So just the best I could do with no money. And through the years, it just progressed. We started getting the garage. That was a big improvement. We could store things. We got a big roller. And I worked pretty much by myself. The worst adventure I had, Irv Brent decided that the courts were dead clay, and the way to rejuvenate the courts was to rototill them. And I said, okay, so I rented a rototiller, which is about that wide, and you couldn't control the depth. So I went out on court and I started rototilling 3 courts by hand. It was 90 degrees that day. And after I rototilled all the courts, stones galore. So how am I going to get rid of the stones? So I took a rake and started raking the stones into lines, and then a wheelbarrow, filling up the wheelbarrow with stone. And now the problem was to level the court after I decimated them. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to do that. I had a Volkswagen at the time, so I took down a section of fence, drove the Volkswagen in, got some railroad ties from across the street and made a drag, and I made figure eights until the court was level. And when I went home at 6 o'clock, I was black. Well, of course, I'm dark from the sun anyway, but with all the clay, my wife said, "My God, what have you been doing?" I said I was rototilling the courts at the club. And then eventually we got lines, and I didn't know anything about lines or how to put them in, and Irv bought metal lines. They were like aluminum stippled so you wouldn't slide on them. And I started putting a line down on center court. We were in an experiment, and I put down the baseline. I ran out of nails. I said, I don't have any more nails. And Irv said, well, you should have enough. There was a whole box of nails for the whole court. I didn't have any idea how they went down, and the tapes were slotted. So I thought the nails would go in the slots. So I put 2,000 nails in one baseline. And so it was like a labor of love, and we worked very hard to get the club. It's a magnificent place. I love it every time I come here. It's a tremendous amount of nostalgia. Yeah, we decided that we would try to mix in some hard-true with the clay. And so when the courts cracked, I would take the hard-true and spread it out and sweep it into the cracks. And then Irv again, Irv was the catalyst in the club. He always got things going, but he never was involved in the equation. And so he said, we need to get red coat. Red coat was similar to what you have here, and we ordered 10 tons of it, and they dropped it off in the parking lot, and I didn't want the neighborhood kids to play in it and break the bags open, so one bag at a time, I picked up 10 tons of red coat and brought them, piled them up along the fence. And the next morning I started to spread it over the 3 courts and back. And it was like a Sunday morning, and the club president came over with his white clothes, and he said, why aren't these courts ready? The clay originally was the clay that was here. They hired somebody to come in with a bulldozer. There were just 3 courts, and he leveled the ground, and they put up the chicken wire fences and took a wet liner and put lines down, and that was the beginning of the Buffalo Racquet Club. But it was a general process over 15 years, and by the time I left, the club was in decent shape. Nothing like it is now. It's gorgeous. We've done such a great job with the plants. It's a gem.
I started with Joe, whatever year it was, in the 70s, and Joe fortunately gave me a huge list of how to take care of the courts, told me everything what to do. And I also had the assistance of Mark McDonald, who helped Joe a lot. And if it wasn't for Mark and Joe's instructions, it would have been tough. But Mark and with Joe's instruction made it easy. But it was tough. Like I said, we had trouble getting people to help, getting people to come over here. My wife would be upset. I used to come over with my wife and measure the lines with just 2 of us, measure for the courts and do the lines like that. Getting the nails out was a big problem, getting volunteers. Again, no computers in those days. I used to get kids from school coming over here. And they didn't, sometimes I would take them to school, have them do it. I taught physics down in Buffalo. After school, I have the kids, I pay $3 an hour to take the nails out. But all in all, like I said before, Joe is the guy who really saved this club in a sense as far as getting the courts ready. Then when the red clay courts came in with Dave Mosculler, who's here tonight, that was another big change, which is a big thing.
what an honor it is to follow two such devoted gentlemen to the club and to tennis, because that's really what this is all about, is tennis. And this club really is, obviously has brought out a lot of passion for us as tennis players. And the fact that it's real clay also. And that was important when the transition began, to keep it real clay, because there was some talk of maybe turning it into a hard-true facility. When I became board member and then president, at that time there were concerns about the surface not becoming playable soon enough after a rain, dusty, etc. And Jim was doing the absolute best he could with what he had. Now, at that point, we're talking 40-year-old clay, which really wasn't properly constituted to begin with, and had been adulterated over the years so that he could no longer really work with it and make it playable in peak condition for very long. The board okayed some money for a company to come in, located a contractor from New York City that flew in, and he gave us his recommendations. It was actually he who took the sample and then gave us the analysis. And then it kind of went from there. Then it was just a matter of convincing several hundred people to convince a couple $100,000. No problem. What we did then was decide that we would keep it clay. Everybody calls it red clay, but like I said, in effect, it's brown with a red dressing. It brings back a lot of emotions because it was a considerable fight. Once the contractor came in, and also I got his name because I called every club in the East Coast, and I spoke with, I believe it's Jim Sheridan, who was the groundskeeper at Forest Hills, where they had red clay, and the U.S. Open was held on red clay at one time, and then he gave me the name of the contractor to call. And so the process, well, was really quite involved. It was the removal of the existing material and laying of the lights. As I stood one day here waiting for 3 of these on one shipment, I looked and I just was dumbfounded because they took up this whole road, 3 of these huge tractor trailers of material. And we found the contractor, or the person that supplied this clay to us, a company in Ontario, who you still use, Paisley Brick and Tile. Then there were 6 total. So then 2 days later, 3 more came. And they lay it down, they grade it, etc., and they do all that. But what many people don't know is that if it weren't for me taking a sample that they sent me just before shipment to be analyzed through a soil analysis person I was using in Hamburg, I would not be here in town. And the reason I say that is they sent me a sample because we kept emphasizing red. So the material he sent me actually contained shale, very little clay. He said, you wanted red, and I called up there and I said, what's going on? You know, the first sample you sent worked out great. He said, well, we decided to try and use this other stuff because it was red. So we almost had 6 tractor trailer fulls of the wrong material. In retrospect, to get it through, I certainly wouldn't have begun if somebody had told me how many hours of mine it would have taken to complete the project, and then what would the lingering effects of people adjusting to it. But as Joe said, you know, and Jim, you just do it for the love of the game. It's such a unique facility, and had again great, terrific help behind me. You know, you can't just do it alone.
Each year we till the courts, and it aerates them. We add new clay and brick dust to the courts. The courts dry faster. They're more playable. and because of the amount of water we now put on, there is very little slippage. So over the years, all these things that everybody's done and contributed have made this club better. Been known to sit on the porch and watch where the puddles are. We fill in where the puddles are with a mixture of clay and brick dust. It really is, as Joe said, a labor of love.
I was on the board president for 2 years, and it was a great experience. And we started the mentor program, which was a wonderful thing for new members. And Ron agreed to be the mentor. So anytime now that a new member comes in, Ron meets with that member. He's done it for many years now. He introduces them to the courts. He introduces them to other people. So we want to keep our members so they feel that they have a home here. Another thing that I looked around, somebody said to me once, this place looks terrible. And, look at that hard earth over there. And I said, he's right. So I started taking a shovel and tilling the beds. And so I started bringing over plants from my own yard, some perennials. And every year I added more. So for 8 years now, that's what I've done. And my husband and I, with the help of the morning guys who play tennis, we spread mulch once a season, and it looks beautiful. And this year, I'm very fortunate to have a crew. I've asked people, and they're helping me do all the weeding in the beds, so it's great. Not only the club members have noticed it and really like the beds and the flowers, but their neighbors also. And one more thing about volunteers, I might say that I think I was responsible for the big volunteer list. When I got to be president, I called everyone and asked them to help. I saw we needed people to help nail the lines. So I think after caller ID came in, people saw who was calling and they didn't answer the phone anymore. But they say, oh, yes, Johanna, okay, I'll try to be there. But they were great. And now they're so seasoned at doing these things, it's wonderful.
But if you spend the time and if you're interested, and I'm going to go back to this, there's a core of people that do this. They don't ask for any thanks. They've done it for years. They continue to do it. And that's what makes this club special.
So this place has evolved beautifully. The people here who took over after we left the club did a magnificent job, very talented.
I mean, come on, what's better than sitting on the porch at night in a beautifully groomed, moist court? Woo! My goodness, there's just nothing better.
The amount of time and money that people put into these courts, it is worth maintaining. It's worth keeping this for as long as possible. This is a gem, and it's not to be repeated anywhere.